Hello, everyone. Uh, Today on the podcast, we have Ankit, who is the student that work on air gear projects, especially a project called Charmil. So Ankit is with me to talk about his experience he had doing GSOCs for JBoss and air gear. Hi, Ankit. Really nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really nice to have you here. Um, First of all, like before we jump into air gear, maybe you can tell us a little bit of how you started programming. So what's your journey? What push you towards becoming a programmer and maybe open source programmer? Because that's the different story, right?
So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Ankit. Uh, so I started my journey from my school days, where my teacher taught me C++, basic of C++, OOPS, and that's where it starts. Uh, I was like really fascinated about the mobile apps. I wanted to make one for me. At that time, I could only compile the Hello World project of Android, nothing else.
We
So
we we all
that's
been
how,
there. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
the
that's
funniest
how,
part. Yeah.
mm, so that's how it started. Yeah.
And then what really like from open source part of you, what make you interested about open source?
Okay, so if you talk about open source, I have heard many things about that. Like Google Summer of Code is a program that promotes open source. There are many programs like that. Uh, so I really wanted to be get into Google Summer of Code from my freshman year because I like there was a lot of hype among my friends, seniors, etc.
And
Uh,
we can have people from other countries here. So what's the freshman year? Like it's a third
First
year.
year,
It's a oh
it's a
sorry, it's the
first
first year. So what actually year of the university you are in at the moment?
third.
Third. Okay, and that's the perfect time to start a GSOC and the perfect time to start your career as well. Cool. Really nice. Thank you very much for that. And since we're talking about GSOC, we're using this shortcut GSOC, but what we mean is Google Summer of Code, which is the internship program that's sponsored by Google that lets you work for the different companies. And within that, JBoss, which is the one of the communities that we have within the Red Hat, have been very fortunate to work with Ankit. Ankit chooses us. So, what really pushed you toward GSOC, and how you found about the GSOC?
Okay. So actually, this project which I chose, that is Charmil. Like I have explored many other projects as well from other organizations. Like if I say name Libre Health, I chose a project there like which was based on Flutter mobile application, but yeah, I applied there as well. But like I wanted to be selected here in the JBoss because it was a new thing for me, like whole new thing, like CLI framework. Uh, I haven't like I would not have imagined like I have like worked on that framework, but in, I have explored many projects, so that's how I picked this project. Yeah.
That's really good. What you're really saying here is that we sometimes we need to think about what's good for us, and we can go for something that's easy. As you mentioned, you have new Flutter, and other technologies like mobile, and you can go with that. But you pushed yourself towards something totally new. And we also, between us, we have this story, right? I think that the first project that you started was JavaScript, and then we moved to the Golang, which was completely new language. Um, you know, with GSOC having so many projects, right? You found this kind of perfect project, and I remember when we first meet up with each other. Do you actually remember what was your first contribution to Aerogear or overall GSOC kind of things?
Yeah, it started with GraphQL link. We were solving some particular problem with that project. I worked on, like I didn't work on the major issues, but it was a small contribution like website for the project, documentation website for the project, and like then I worked some of the Go parts of this project. Uh, yeah, that's how it started from my side. Like I got merged some of my PRs, like 4 or 5 PRs in this project. Yeah.
And this is really it. Sometimes when you're starting with the GSOC, you don't need to have this very specific, explicit knowledge. You can just start with something simple. Many projects often like missing the documentation website or have a many good, like good first issue. So this is a great example. And like as you mentioned, like this was the first Golang project that you have took upon, right? And after that, we swiftly navigating to the Charmil, right? So the Charmil, it's a our project that we work within the GSOC. It's been mainly driven by the problems we have seen in community, like around the Cobra SDK. Do you remember how you started working on the Charmil, and tell us the kind of inception of the Charmil itself?
Yeah. So we started something different, but we ended up something very different. Uh-huh. So,
Yeah.
but we were inspired from a framework crew that already exists in the community. Uh, but yeah, our idea was a little bit different. Registries from the uh, like managing CLI registries, for saying it to particular.
Yeah, like
Then
installing different CLIs from the CLI, so you can install many plugins itself, right?
yeah, it's like NPM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what was your Charmel story? So like basically we started working on this registry, and I remember when we started doing it, like we often figured out, okay, that's actually a lot of work, and we've seen that community somehow manages to solve that. But a core problem that we wanted to solve was where the challenges around how to build this like multi-component libraries for CLI. So you can have a one CLI and another CLI and so on, right? And do you remember what was your first thing with Charmil, and like how you approached the problem? Like you can tell
Okay.
us a little bit about what's the Charmil itself.
So, first, like in the community bonding period, we like majorly researched about our problem and how we can approach the problem. Then we started building our initial code base, initial code structure as in the Charmil, and then we like started build like we started with very basics like with internationalization logging. These features are required by every CLI, and we started with this providing these features to every CLI.
Yeah. So that's the core part of the Charmel. But when you were working on Charmel, you actually started with something else. You started with the project called Validator. Can you tell us a little bit about what Charmel Validator is and what specific problem it resolves for Cobra commands?
Okay, so if we tell about validator, it is I think unique thing in the community. It does not exist, I suppose, and yeah, we like what it does is it validates the Cobra commands, as simple as that. It's just like React testing library. We use here also we use it as testing library in the Go tests, so that if there is something wrong with the Cobra commands, the build can fail, developer can fix it. Yeah, that's it for the validator.
Yeah, like it validates the commands, but what it validates the how developers write the command. So, if, for example, if you're writing very poor description to the command, you're going to get error. And developers actually, what's funny about it is you can control how this validation happens. So, for example, for some commands you don't want that, you will be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
Which was actually proven to be very good feature that we started to use. It was the first thing that we written because we knew that there was a high demand for it. So there's various different tools that are already using Validator successfully in production. So you have like App Services CLI done in Red Hat Developer that uses Charmil Validator from the beginning, right? And it validates number of commands against different patterns. So um, yeah, that's really nice that you have done it. I remember the first PR, it was like lots of really good discussions about architecture, how we should structure the commands, how we should execute the rules, what's the validator config, we should use for skipping commands. That's really what makes the GSOCs GSOC, GSOC, sorry, amazing place, right? You can have this very deep conversations on GitHub. You can have like the flow that you may often not have when you kind of going on work on non open source project, right? So you will be asked
Right.
to do some like requirements, and you do in a GSOC. We often focus on community, what specific problems for the community we're resolving, and making sure that we're making other developers' life easier, right? Um, yeah, and sometimes we get this experience right within the project on a GSOC. And can you tell us a little about that? So what's your overall experience with a Charmil? Like I know we could talk about a lot about those things like SDK starter that you have written, the CLI. It's also kind of really cool that allows you to spin up things. But for this interview, what I'm more interested is that what was your overall experience with working with those projects?
Okay, so working with Charmil, it was like completely my new experience for me. Working on the technology, like which when I started with it, I did not knew Golang. First of all, I knew very little bit of it, no design patterns, nothing at all. But yeah, I progressed in like community bonding period, and slowly I learned everything. But yeah, still there is a lot to learn. Then, actually, for the Jamil, I tried to solve like one issue per day, or like three, four issues per week. Like this, I targeted, and I think we were able to solve like this. But then, when we solved one issue, then there comes three more issues with that. So that's kind of workflow we follow. Yeah.
Yeah, there are many funny moments we had within the
Mhm.
reviews, and many, we could talk about it for a long time. What I really like, I was always impressed that over the 7 years I'm working with the GSOC students, that was the most impressive, the reports page. So this is actually actual web page that anyone can go with, like it's Ankit Hans GitHub.io GSOC 21, and he actually every PR, every issue he worked on, he actually put here so you can track it, see how this progressed. Like, and it's you see, it's like you not always work on the code. Sometimes you were fixing some CI/CD issues, organizing the structure, and not all work it's actually reflected because we had a lot of discussions. And sometimes um, the funny thing is that sometimes during discussions we realize that some of the work may not be needed, right? um yeah, Jesus, that was really nice time. I personally have, and it was a real pleasure to work with you, Ankit. I always like admire students who are like you, very passionate. You are bringing ideas forward all the time. um yeah, would you be able to summarize your GSOC like in a couple of sentences, like how it was?
It was amazing. Uh, so
I at this point I don't believe you, but yeah, yeah.
yeah, every day was like
It's never
full of
never
hurdles.
so like it's never so like oh amazing thing. There's always some tough days, right? That you need to catch the bullet and forget about and just do it, right?
Actually, when we start and when we go through the process, then it feels like it is difficult. But when we complete it, it feels like it was easy and we done it right. So,
Yeah, it's all comes with experience. So the more you do, the more confident you are, and it's every
mm,
time when you start, you may be worried and so on. And that's why we have this interview. So if you're watching and you're looking about like having Google Summer of Code with Air Gear, look at Ankit. He's so confident now. He wasn't like that a couple of months back. It's always this kind of transition, right? When you need to. It's not about the skills all the time. It's more about like just getting used to the flows that are upstream that are a little bit different when you're working on typical projects or projects for university and so on.
mhm.
Um, to mind your time, just one last question. What advice would you give to someone looking to become open source contributor or someone who just like looking to work on a Google Summer of Code next year?
Okay. So, um, if someone is looking to contribute some project, like find some project that like Some open source contributors becomes open source contributors by like contributing to the projects which they are already using. So they patch up some issues there, and like they like become open source contributors. Then there are some things you can focus on, that is good first issues. You can go to any repository on which you want to contribute and go to good first issues, try them out, take help from the community. Yeah, that's how everything starts in open source.
Sorry, I was actually muted, so
Yeah.
I shouldn't probably do it from through the live stream. So what I was saying is that um, we often have this situation when we have one of the repository that have a good first issues, and maintainers who putting those, they're actually knowing that good first issue will require for them more investment and teach the contributors how to do the change. Overall, once you start working good first issue, you should learn more. So you're contributing and giving some value for upstream project, but you're also learning a lot. So it's not always like that. So depending on the community, but with Air Gear, we have a lot of good first issue around the different projects. And here I actually had open app services CLI, and you also have a couple good first issue, and that's a Red Hat developer community. Cool. Thank you very much for finding time, Ankit. It was a real pleasure to interview you, and hopefully we'll see each other. I remember as uh, a GSOC student now that passed the program, you can also become a mentor in the future. So, if you're looking for any more information, you can reach out to AirGear through the chat. We have this chat. You can also ping me on a GitHub. My nickname is WW Uh, yeah. Thank you very much for that. See you soon.